Hello my friends, and welcome to this next video in this series. Here we shall be looking at objects in JavaScript. So, what exactly is an object? An object is just about anything we can see or feel or touch, or anything we can think of or imagine. So, look around you. There are objects all around you. From the people that we see on the streets, to the cars, and the animals and the buildings that we have all around us. They are all objects. There are two basic things that stand out when you talk of an object. The first thing is that an object can have a property on them. So looking at car as an object, a car can have the color property, a car can have the price property, that is the price of the car. A car can have the make property or brand property. So talking about whether the car is a Lamborghini or a Bugatti or a Benz and so on and so forth. The second thing is that an object can have functionality or can have the things that it can do. Still talking about the car as an object, a car can sound a horn. So that is one functionality of a car. A car can also flash a light. A car can also be driven. That is, we can drive a car. So these are some of the functionalities of a car. Now in JavaScript, how do we begin to write objects and use them? And what are some of the usefulness of an object? Well, before we go into writing the code and showing you how to write an object and use an object, let's look at objects a bit more closer. Usually in coding, and even in JavaScript of course, objects are made from something called a class. You can think of a class as a template for objects. So when you define a class, or when you have a class, you have the standard properties and functions that you want that class to have. And so any object that is made from that class will also have those properties and those functions or functionalities. So if, for example, I have a car class, this class, I want it to have three basic properties. Let's say I want it to have the color property, the make property, and the price property on it. And also, I want it to have some functionalities. So I want this car or any car that is made from this class to be able to flash a light, to be able to sound a horn, and to be able to be driven by people. So now, if I have a particular car made from this template, it means that that car will be able to have those functionalities I defined for this class template and also have those properties. So the car is going to have a color, the car is going to have a price, and the car is going to have a make on it. Also, the car will be able to sound a horn, the car will be able to flash a light, and the car will also be able to be driven by people. And you can have different cars made from this template. You can have as many as you want. The reason for having a class is that you want the objects that are made from that class to be standardized. So you don't want to have a car that is behaving like a bicycle. You don't want to buy a Bugatti and then the Bugatti is behaving like a bicycle, or the Bugatti is behaving like a horse. That would be weird, right? So we use class as a template, and that class will have the properties and functions that any object made from the class would have. So we don't want the object made from this class to misbehave or behave like other objects. So in JavaScript, we can actually define a class, and then from that class, we begin to create objects from the class. But that is not actually very necessary, unlike in some other languages like Java, where you must have a class and then from the class, you'll be able to create objects. In JavaScript, it is easier to create objects and work with objects. So we use something called the object literal. So instead of defining the class and then creating objects from the class, which can be a bit cumbersome, some of the time we use the object literal. And that is what we're going to be seeing in this video. And mind you, the object literal way of creating and working with objects is very, very common. And in fact, it is often preferred by programmers, I would say, especially in JavaScript. So instead of having a class, creating the template and then creating object, you just begin to create object directly and work with that object. Now, how do we begin to define an object literal and how do we begin to use them? So in this video, let's see how we can create the object literal and work with objects. So now let's turn to our VS Code and of course to our browser and begin to create objects using the object literal way and work with these objects. Right here is my VS Code, of course. So in order to create objects using the object literal way, just going to define a variable. I can use the const keyword to define a variable. And then let me say I want to create a car object. We've talked a lot about cars, right? So let me create a car object. So I'm going to say const Toyota. Toyota is a kind of car, right? So I'm going to say equals, and then I open my curly braces like this. So in JavaScript, this right here is representing an object. I know you must have seen me, or you've already seen me use these curly braces to open up a function body or a block of code. But then in JavaScript, when you define a variable like this, saying let or const, and then the variable name right here, and then you say equals, and then curly braces like this, that is the opening and the closing curly brace, you have defined an object, and this is an object literal. So within these curly braces, you're going to have those properties and functionalities that you want this particular object of Toyota to have. So now let's use some of those properties that I already talked about. So this Toyota can have a color property. So I can have color like this. And then after this color, I'm going to put the colon like this and then give the color that I want this Toyota to have. So I can say red, assuming I want this Toyota to be of the color red. So right here, I've defined one property, which is color, and this color is having the value of red right here. Now, I want to define other properties for this Toyota right here. So I'm going to give a comma and then click on enter, and let me give the price for the Toyota. So I'm going to say price, and then again, type my colon, and then I'm going to say $45. Like this. So this Toyota is going to have a price of $45. Right here, you can see that I'm representing the price right here as string, right? So that's because I wanted to add this dollar symbol. If I did not want to add the dollar symbol, I could simply do something like 45, just like that. And so this is of the type number, right? And I can give a comma and then click enter. And the last thing I want to give is the make of this car. So I'm going to say make like this and then put the colon, and then I want to give the make of this car. Coincidentally, the make of this car is also Toyota. So I'm going to give a string that will have the make of this car. So I'm going to say Toyota made like this. So this right here are the properties and values of this Toyota object right here. And we can begin to access some of the properties of this Toyota right here. So if I want to access the color of this Toyota, I can say something like Toyota.color like this. And let's say I want to print it to the console, right? So let me print it to the console. So I'm going to say console.log Toyota.color. So as soon as I save, and then let's go to the console. So I'm going to open up my console, and right here you can see that red has been printed on the console. I can also access the price of this Toyota. So I can say something like console.log Toyota.price like this. So now you can see that 45 has also been printed on the console. And lastly, let's assume that I want to access the make property. So I can say console.log Toyota.make and save. So you can see that we have red 45 and then Toyota made all printed right here to the console. So this is how we can work with objects. And of course, all these are properties. We can also have functionalities for this Toyota. So let's say I want this Toyota to flash a light. So I can define a function that anytime I call is going to flash a light. right? So I can come down here and say, we want this Toyota to have a flash a light functionality. So we can just say something like flash a light, like this. And then we can give the colon like this. And then we can define a function. So we can say function and then like this. And within here, let's say we just want to console.log this Toyota flashes a light. So this right here is a property, all right? And the value is a function. And what is the function supposed to do? The function is just to log this Toyota flashes a light to the console. So if I say something like Toyota dot flash a light, like this, because this right here is a function, right? So as soon as I save my file, you can see right here on the console, it says this Toyota flashes a light. And instead of doing it this way, instead of declaring a property like this and then having the function, one thing we can do is just delete all of this. And then I'm just going to define the function directly. So I'm going to say something like flash a light and then open the curly braces like this. So this is a function, all right? And then I can just say the same thing. And we're going to say console.log this Toyota flashes a light, like so. So when I save, I'm still going to get this Toyota flashes a light on the console. So right here, we've created an object called Toyota. And inside of the object, we have a color property, which has the value of red. It has a price property, which has the value of 45. It has the make property, which has the value of Toyota made. And then it also has some functionality. So this Toyota is able to flash a light. So the name of the functionality is flash a light. So this Toyota has a function right here, flash a light. And the flash a light function just logs this right here to the console. All right. So we can even have more functions that this Toyota can have, this Toyota object can have. So let's say we want it to drive, right? So we can just say drive as a function and then open the curly braces like this. And I'm going to say console.log drive away, like so. So in that same way, I can also ask this Toyota to drive. So I can say something like Toyota.drive. And as soon as I save, it logs drive away to the console. So you can see these are the functions that this Toyota object right here is having, along with all of these properties. So this is how we can define an object in JavaScript, and this is how we can give the object these properties, and we can also give it these functions or functionalities, and then we can access the properties of the function using the dot notation right here. You must have noticed that we have been using this dot notation right here to access the properties and the functions of these Toyota objects. All right. And you're probably thinking, we've also used this dot to access some things or some properties on a string. So in previous videos, when we created strings, so if for example, I come down here and say, let name equals Dominic, right here. This is a string right here, right? But then we could say name dot, and in fact, this name is a special keyword in JavaScript. So let me change it to name1 and change this one to name1 too. All right. So because it is a special keyword, it struck out the name right there. So now I've changed it to name1. So I can say name1.length, assuming I want to find out the length of this name1 variable right here. So I will say name1.length. So right here, I'm also using the dot notation. When we work with objects, we use dot notation to access properties and functions on that particular object, just like we've been doing here. Toyota.color, Toyota.price, Toyota.make, Toyota.flash a light, Toyota.drive, and so on and so forth. In that same way, we have a string here, and I'm using the dot notation to access the length property on this name1. So is name1 a variable, or rather, is name1 a string, or is it an object? Well, the truth is, most of the things we work with, or most of the data types that we work with in JavaScript are objects. So anytime we create a string right here, this creation of this string also creates an instance of a string object. We'll call it a string object. And therefore, we're able to use the dot notation right here to access the properties and even functions that we can use on a string, because there is a string object that exists each time we create a string variable like this. Therefore, we're able to use the dot notation to access the length. We can even use something like name1.split. This is a function that is present in a string. We can use name1.indexOf. This is also another function that exists on a string. So we're able to use this dot notation on this name1 string variable because when we created the variable right here, a string object was created. So that was JavaScript doing that for us. So in JavaScript, there exists the string object, the number object, and these objects have properties and functions that exist on them. So whenever we create a string like this, known as a string literal, so we have access to those properties and to those functions using the dot notation. Right now, this is just the basics of the objects in JavaScript. I don't want to go too long into this video, so I just wanted to give us a brief introduction to objects in JavaScript, and from the next video, we're going to see how we can begin to manipulate objects and some of the other things we can do with objects. So see you in the next video. Please, my friends, like my videos and subscribe to my channel. It will go a long way in helping me to create videos like this.